Without objection will be entered into the record. And the gentleman from Kansas is now recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Polis, members of the committee, thank you for the time to be here with all of you today. I'm honored to be before this esteemed committee, and I want to thank you for your work this afternoon to ensure that we protect the safety and security of Americans' emails, other digital communication, other data that's being stored, their privacy, and ensure that our Federal Government is doing everything we can to protect Americans while ensuring that we protect their individual liberties at the same time. And I've heard the Chairman speak about that eloquently, and I thank him for his leadership this afternoon and the time the committee is taking away from other tasks to be here to put such attention towards this issue. The bill before us, H.R. 1560, resolves many concerns that Americans have related to the protection of their digital information, their safety, and cybersecurity by amending Title 18 to protect their privacy. And there's been much discussion this afternoon about the balance between privacy and government intrusion to that, and this bill speaks to how we protect Americans in that regard. And so I have an amendment that I would like to offer, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee called the Email Privacy Act. It's H.R. 699. It's a bill that would resolve a digital privacy issue where Americans' safety and security and privacy of their emails are not being protected today. A 1986 law that allows the government to review the emails of Americans or other digital communication without so much as a warrant or due process or probable cause. It's an outrage to most Americans. The IRS's and other Federal agencies' responses have been flippant about this protection. In fact, the IRS's position was, paraphrase, Americans do not have an expectation of privacy, they argued, in their email accounts. I think everyone on this committee would disagree, and most members of Congress, if not all members of Congress, would disagree, and that's what this underlying bill is speaking to. Do Americans have an expectation of privacy and digital security? Is the government going to protect them from intrusion into their privacy? My amendment would simply expand that protection by ensuring that this 1986 law would be amended. What this 1986 law says is that when you send out an email or you have any sort of digital correspondence that's over 180 days old, it is now searchable and seizable by the government without any due process or any probable cause or any warrant. It's as if it's been abandoned. And Americans don't believe that. I know this committee doesn't believe that, and this Congress doesn't believe that. And so the bill before us would expand the role of our expand the opportunities for government to protect our private security, and the amendment before us would do the same by also amending Title 18 to do the same thing. My amendment and the amendment that this committee, I hope, will take up is very popular. I think it's a 90% issue in this country. It's the third most co-sponsored bill in the United States Congress. It has 261 co-sponsors. More than 218 members of the House are original co-sponsors of this bill, including 11 out of 13 members of this committee and half or more of the Intel, Judiciary, and Homeland Security committees. I believe this amendment is made in order. Not only is it germane to the subject matter of protecting the digital privacy and safety and security of the American people, but I also believe it will pass easily on the House floor, and it will make the bill stronger and give the bill a better chance of passing with significant votes in the House and Senate. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity to address the committee, and thank you for your time.
Mr. Yoder, thank you very much. Mr. Yoder made convincing arguments about the need for personal protections, and I do agree with that. But the essence of this bill that we should not lose sight of, I believe, is to say that there has been a perception, if not an actual impediment, for companies reporting intrusions into their networks for fear of the Federal Government, State Government, some law enforcement taking punitive action against them, perhaps up to and including receiving information that might be personal to one of their customers. Isn't this really all about a great opportunity for us to recognize that we have a problem, and that by taking this data and information out, it's really the information that would be contained therein would allow a forensic audit to determine who and where this attack came from? Isn't that the essence, that we're trying to clear out, in essence, all the data and information and allow law enforcement to be aware of all the attacks and then to see them and learn from them and do something about it. Is that the essence of all this? And then we're trying to deal with these other things? Is that right, Mr.
I think that's
Yoder?
well stated, Mr. Chairman, and I think the concern for the House and this committee will be to determine that we ensure that the content and the personal information of Americans in that process, that we respect their Fourth Amendment liberties, and I think that's the balance this committee is trying to work forward. The amendment I've offered, I think, it continues that intent and the good work of the committee.
So search and seizure would be included in that, and so you think we're effectively trying to do that. Give someone the ability to identify and report, and then the law enforcement the ability to see this and do an investigation or see it for what it is after stripping out all the data and information.
I think that makes sense, Mr. Chairman.
I think that's what we're here for, and I would like to, as Mr. Himes, I think has eloquently said, as well as you, Mr. Yoder, we've got to do this to really protect us. This is a protection, not something that we should fear. Chairman Cole. Mr. Polis.
Thank you. So, Mr. Yoder, are you saying that emails that our constituents might have written to one another or to somebody that they bought something from on eBay without any kind of warrant or process can be taken and looked at by the IRS, by DOJ, by DHS, by other government agencies?
Mr. Polis, that's exactly what I'm saying, and I think that's why we've seen such a response from members of Congress, because that's an outrage.
And can their old correspondence, their personal letters that they keep in a chest, be taken without a warrant or due process?
No, somehow the government has decided that our digital information and correspondence receives a lesser protection than the documents that may be on our desk at home.
And if your amendment is made in order and, of course, passes, since the majority of Congress is already sponsors, it would certainly pass. It would provide the same protection around old emails that we have around old letters in chests or old voicemails?
I think that's the idea, is that Americans don't believe that their Fourth Amendment rights somehow stop with the Internet era, and they believe that their digital correspondence should have the same constitutional protections as their paper correspondence.
Well, I strongly encourage our committee to take this opportunity to address a concern that a strong majority of Congress agrees is something that it's time to update. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much. I've got a question for you, and I know I'm going to yield myself my time, and I'm sorry. I had asked a question earlier. I'm going to go back to what I had stated a minute ago. The essence of this bill is when there has been a breach, a cyber breach, where a company, an individual notices that they have been breached, not a transfer of information necessarily that might take place extraneously from one number to another. It is about a breach. Is this walled off in the law? And what Mr. Polis was talking about is in another part of the law, which I think you have said we have real problems with agreeing that the Federal Government should respect that privacy. Should we confuse these two? Because you're trying to say, I thought where there's a breach, here's how we're going to handle the breach, not on an ongoing part of doing business or during a normal use of a phone. Does that make sense?
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the question. And I think for the American people, they feel that their digital information is threatened by a variety of different entities. And they want to know that when it's stored somewhere with a third party, an Internet service provider, or it's in the cloud, or it's when they store digital information with Gmail or other companies that are out there, that information isn't being read by foreign countries. It isn't being stolen
or by our government.
Right, or being stolen by other competitors or by our own government. They want to know that that's their private communication. And frankly, whether it's our government or other entities, there has been this notion in the world that that information is not as safe and secure as maybe the papers laying on your table right there, Mr. Chairman. And what the American people want to know with this legislation is that their cyber information is secure from all intruders, and that involves the government ensuring that they can protect that. It also ensures that this body does its work to make sure that the American people know that their information, their content, isn't being used for other purposes by the government in violation of their Fourth Amendment rights. And I think there's a way to do that and protect the cybersecurity from all intruders, both
Yeah.
home and abroad.
Well, what this committee is going to have to do, and I have not given you the news, good or bad, either way yet, is a decision evidently has been made that your amendment that you are asking for is not germane. Meaning that really what this bill is about is where there's been an intrusion. Where there has been an intrusion into a system, not the ongoing application of the law.
I think both items of legislation deal with the topic of cybersecurity.
Yes,
They
sir.
both deal with Title 18 of the Federal Code. And I think for Americans, they want to know that in
Yes,
this legislation, in our efforts to protect their cyber information, that we're also ensuring
Yeah.
that the government can't, that they have to follow the Fourth Amendment, they have to have a warrant to read that information and use the content for other purposes.
Well,
I think most Americans would find it consistent, but I understand that the committee's got a tough job, and I respect the hard
Well,
work
perhaps,
it needs to do.
I got this on the fly. Our staff is going to sit down with you. This has finally been resolved this afternoon after we came into the meeting, so I heard the answer, can't give the mathematics behind it. But what I'm trying to suggest to you is, this is about where there has been a cyber breach. How do we have companies to want to share with the government, and under what provisions and what are the limitations to that? Not necessarily the ongoing relationships that may have happened. So I think both of y'all are really honest and truthful to stay on point of what you're doing. I just want you to know I was trying to draw a difference between those two. Thank you very much. Mr. McGovern.
I have no questions other than to say that I support both your amendments. And I think on this issue of privacy, I think too often in Washington, I think we underestimate what an important concern it is to people all throughout this country. And while I appreciate the explanation by the Chairman that, Mr. Yoder, your amendment may not be germane, we're the Rules Committee. We waive germaneness all the time. So, on this issue, I think we ought to give people the widest latitude so people feel comfortable with what we're doing. And with that, I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. Thank you very much. The gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Woodall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to talk about Mr. Yoder's amendment. Just briefly, I have not yet co-sponsored his underlying bill this cycle, but I did last cycle when it was introduced cooperatively with another great Georgian. I see that you've traded out a great Georgian for the gentleman from Colorado this cycle.
Mr. Woodall, if I might, we're working through the alphabet. We're working alphabetically, so we just haven't gotten to the W.
I appreciate that. I'm looking here at the Fourth Amendment, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. Folks often ask me why we do redundant things around here. I take it that if I have an email server in my home, like Hillary Clinton did, that I would absolutely be protected by the Fourth Amendment. But if I have my email out there on a server in Colorado or California or Utah or where have you, I have no Fourth Amendment protections today, and it's only if we were to pass your language that we would create that right to privacy. Am I understanding the language correctly?
I think you make a great point, Mr. Woodall, in that the papers on our desk, they can't be, the government can't just kick down our doors and take those papers without going through process, without going to a judge and getting a warrant, without following the Fourth Amendment. And it's very clear. It's one of the reasons we revolted from the British. It's one of the reasons we created this country is so that we would have protections in our persons and things and documents. And that's what the Fourth Amendment speaks to. Granted, the Internet wasn't around at that time, but I think the intent of the founders would say that a document, even though it's a digital copy, still has Fourth Amendment protections. That's what the courts have been holding in this country, rightfully so. And really what they've left, as you referenced, Mrs. Clinton and others, the only opportunity to protect yourselves from government intrusion is apparently to have a server in your own home, which every American can't afford and can't do. And so we've got to protect all Americans in this regard.
Let me ask you this, and I don't want you to throw anybody under the bus, but the legislative process is complicated. You have almost 300 co-sponsors on your underlying legislation, as you did last Congress too. More than a third of those are Democrats. One of the most bipartisan, most widely co-sponsored bills in the Congress. If we end up running into a germaneness problem, as the chairman alluded to, do we have an opportunity? Is there something we can do to help push this through the committee process? Because so often we have things added as amendments that just can't get through the process somewhere else. But yours is one of the most popular pieces of legislation in this Congress.
Thank you, sir. It's the third most co-sponsored bill in the United States House. 218 members of Congress were original co-sponsors of it. I appreciate the comments of my friend Mr. McGovern from the other side of the aisle to show the bipartisan nature of this. You know, the American people are looking for Congress to lead in a bipartisan way. This is water running downhill when it comes to the simplicity of this concept. Americans get it. It's a 90% issue. And while I think, you know, technically the parliamentarian may make certain rulings, the Rules Committee has opportunities to decide what's germane. I would say, you know, when you're talking about common sense, the Chairman's mentioned common sense in his opening remarks as well. I think most folks would see cybersecurity, meaning protection from all intruders, both home and abroad. But to the extent that the committee can't move forward on that, and I know they have a very tough job and they've got to balance lots of factors, I would encourage all my colleagues to co-sponsor the legislation and to push the body forward in moving this legislation this Congress. I think it would be a great bipartisan win, and I think the Senate, they have a companion bill that's also sponsored by Republicans and Democrats, and I think the President would sign it into law. Hopefully he would.
As Mr. McGovern alluded, I'd be happy to yield, my friend.
No, I mean, one other option may be a discharge petition. You know, if we can't get the committees to, you know, to move it forward. So I just throw that out there as a possibility.
As Mr. McGovern suggested earlier, it would shock folks to know that because you're looking at your computer in your home, you feel like the information is right there. It would shock people to know that they do not have that protection as we sit here today.
I'm shocked that I agree with you on this.
Mr. Chairman, I'm trying to bring the world together here. It's an opportunity to do good things.
You know, you've turned into Mikey, not Kevin. Let Mikey have it, and he'll fix it all.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
These are very difficult issues, and this is why you being here, Mr. Nunes, Mr. Schiff being here, and giving credence to what the problem was is what they're trying to solve. This is a big issue where I think a lot of members, I mean, you talk about 38 amendments right now, we may have 500 when, in fact, we tackle this issue. It needs to be tackled. I'm for tackling it, and I believe you're doing the right thing to push that cause. The gentleman yields back his time. Mr. Stivers.
I just want to thank the gentlemen for their hard work, and if this amendment is not going to be the main order, I just want to help as a co-sponsor one of the 300 work to try to make sure we get this thing moving. I understand the Judicial Committee is planning markup, but, you know, these protections need to happen for people as soon as possible. So, great bill, we need to make it happen. Sadly, we're not going to make it happen today, but I want to keep working to help make it happen.
Gentleman yields back his time. Mr. Collins. Thank you. Gentleman yields back his time. Mr. Burns.
Chairman, I would just say to Mr. Yoder, I'm also
If gentleman could turn on his microphone and point that to him. Thank you.
I'm new, I'm still learning. I think it's a very important bill, and I don't, you know, if it's not germane for purposes of this bill, anything I can do to help you bring this up, bring it before the entire House, I want to help you do, because I agree with you. I think this is extremely important to the American people. I do hear about it from my constituents. They don't understand all the ins and outs, but they depend upon us to understand the ins and outs and get it done for them. If we can't do it this way, I'll do anything I can do to help you do it your way.
Gentleman yields back his time. Mr. Newhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nothing really special to add other than my own support. I'm one of the sponsors of the bill and would do anything I could to help my colleagues get that across the finish line, whether it's today or not. I think it's very important, and the American people recognize that, and we need to take action. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you very much, gentleman. Yields back his time. I want to thank both of you, not only for your time, your interest, but also your intellect that you bring to this. I think it's more than a curiosity. I think it's got to be that we need to do something about what we see as a problem. And I appreciate each of you being here today, and I want to thank both of you. Tell Brookie I said hi. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.